Okay, good morning, everyone. We'll begin the meeting. This is our 210th public meeting with the Gaming Commission. Chairman Crosby is away, so I'll be chairing in his stead today. First on the agenda will be the approval of the minutes. Commissioner McDonald.
Thank you. Fellow Commissioners, I move that we approve the minutes of the February 2nd, 2017 meeting, subject to corrections for typographical errors and other non-material matters.
I second that.
I had just one change under the 12:46 time frame. The last sentence where I noted we also met with family support workers at Hanscom who are helping veterans deal with problem gambling. And that next sentence should be, we provided them some additional information about the Gaming Commission's efforts. So just try to reword that sentence. I can write it out a little bit more clear, but focusing on the fact we're meeting with their support workers who offer help to veterans on their problem gambling issues.
Right, I think Cecilia has that change. Any further discussion? All those in agreement?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 4-0. Next, we have our administrative update. Executive Director Bedrosian.
Good morning, Commissioners. General Counsel Blue is running a little late. She will be here momentarily. But I would like to welcome a new member of the MGC team today. In the second row here is Paul Eldridge, is a welcome to the financial investigator in the Investigations Enforcement Bureau. Commissioner Zuniga, you will like his qualifications. He's a certified public accountant, certified internal auditor, and certified in risk management assurance, and comes to us from Century Bank, where he was audit director. So in his role, he'll be responsible for planning and execution of annual internal audit plans. He's going to be a very valuable member of the team. And I'd like to say there's also a display of teammanship this morning. I didn't give Paul additional or appropriate warning that he was going to come in front of the commission, so he wasn't wearing a sports jacket. You may recognize his jacket as having previously been modeled by our CFAO, who keeps a rack of extra clothes just in case such emergencies like this happen. So we are happy to have Paul and welcome him to our team.
I think he's thrilled you pointed that out. Welcome.
Yeah, welcome. Welcome.
Great team. You'll enjoy it.
Welcome.
Yeah. That's actually all I have. So.
Terrific. We'll move on then to our Ombudsman report. Ombudsman Ziemba.
Good morning, Commissioners. First up today, we have the Wynn Boston Harbor quarterly report for the last quarter of 2016. Joining us today are Bob DeSalvio, President, Wynn Boston Harbor, Jackie Crum, Senior Vice President and General Counsel for Wynn, and Chris Gordon, President of Wynn Design and Development for Massachusetts. Before they give the report, I just want to applaud them and thank them for all their continuing outreach efforts. Last night, they had another meeting out in Charlestown to give an update regarding their project, and I know it was full of very helpful information. So, thank them for their continuing outreach efforts. And with that, I will turn it to Bob.
John, quick question. Do we have or Bob, maybe you can answer this. What kind of turnout are you still seeing for these meetings? I mean, I know the material starts to get a little dry, but what's been the response from the community still?
Good morning, Commissioners. Am I live?
Good morning.
Oh, there we go. Good morning, Commissioners.
Good morning.
Last night was actually very light attendance, and I actually take that as a very good sign, because when I think about the early meetings that we had, in particular in Charlestown, lots of issues to discuss, lots of questions about transportation, mainly Sullivan Square-related issues. But in talking to the few folks that were there, they've actually heard that things are going well on the site. There has not been an issue. Chris is going to get into later on about the mass excavation and the part of the project that we were most concerned about, which was the early work, which created a lot of traffic, and it's actually gone extremely well. And so good response from the few that were there, said things they've heard are going really well. So I take that as actually a good sign when you have a public meeting and very few people come out. I mean, I'd love for there to be more, but I think they actually feel pretty good about what's going on.
Okay.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And just one more follow-up, because I know the commission had received the correspondence on this as well. We're going to do a follow-up meeting with the track workers for Suffolk Downs. If you recall, some time ago, we did a mailing. We wanted to know for those that, you actually helped us do the mailing, those track workers that were interested in what we were doing. So we're going to do a follow-up. And I've got a couple questions that I'll do offline with John about how to reach out to more folks. But I think we're doing it April 29th, I believe, in East Boston, or right near the track at the Hilton Garden Inn. So we'll do a session to follow up with them as well. And I know they wrote to the commission, but I wanted to let you know that we addressed, getting another meeting on the books with those folks.
Thank you.
Just take it away, John.
That's great.
Great, thank you, John. Also, shout out to Joe. Joe's been very helpful in doing the monthly updates with Chris and the team. We're going to try to combine those with some tours. I also want to open that up for any of the commissioners, that from time to time, if you want to join those tours. I think, are we first Friday typically in May? First Friday of each month. And maybe some of the staff members for the commission that have not gone on a site tour. It's pretty amazing, but Joe's been a good link for the commission to meet regularly with Chris, and then we have once a month, usually a thorough run-through on the site. Today, we have actually great news to report on the progress on how it's all going, and we're going to divide this up a little bit. We're going to start with Jackie Crum, who's going to talk about the permitting side.
Great.
This on? Yes. So, as you know, we finished the permitting for the main project, and that's currently under construction. We're now moving on to the next phase of permitting, which is primarily centered on the cove and the sediment remediation that needs to happen within the cove. So, to that end, we are preparing to file a notice of project change with MIPA, hopefully within the next month. And that's going to be focused on the sediment remediation, as well as bringing MIPA up to date with some of the programmatic changes that we've made, that we've previously discussed with the commission. But as the project's developed, we've made some changes, obviously, in the retail, increasing the meeting and event space. So all of that will go through MIPA, and hopefully we'll have a decision within the second quarter. So those are the main things. In conjunction with that, we're also making some filings under the Massachusetts Contingency Plan. This is with DEP, and we're preparing a Phase 3, also related to the sediment remediation, which will go through the actual process of how we're going to remediate that sediment. We're looking at a number of different options, and we're working with DEP to figure out what works best.
Jackie, would it make sense at some point when the notice of project change, that was one of the things I flagged in reviewing the presentation for today, would it make sense, we'd like to have you guys come back when the notice of project change is filed and kind of walk through some of those changes again with us?
Absolutely, we can do that.
Great, thank you. I'm going to give you a quick update on construction, and that's always best done by photographs. It's more fun than spreadsheets and numbers. So if you look at the photograph there, this is a couple of weeks ago, and what you see is the garage excavation is far, far along. We've put the slurry wall around the entire perimeter, which is the foundation wall. As we talked about last time, that's put in advance of the excavation. So the slurry wall, which is shown in the bright red line around that hole, is all the way down to bedrock. In some cases, it's 100 feet down to bedrock. We then had about 500,000 tons of soil and about 30 million gallons of water inside the hole that had to come out. So of that 500,000 tons of soil, we've moved all but about 75,000 tons. So we expect probably around the second week in March, the last truck will leave the site full of dirt. So that's we're very happy about that. Now that most of the soil has left, we're starting to put in mat slabs. You see in the bottom of the hole, you'll see concrete slabs being poured. That's the first step in the parking garage. That's a 5-foot thick concrete slab that's going to cover the entire bottom of the garage. You would think that would hold the building down. It actually holds the garage in place, but because of the water table, it actually has some buoyancy. So once we put that slab in, we then drill rock anchors through it. We've got about 1,600 rock anchors to drill down to bedrock and grout those in. That actually anchors the building into the ground, and then the garage starts coming up from there. So the next step after this slab is done is start to pour the first floor of the garage, which is known as the B3 level, then the B2, then the B1, then you're up at grade. And in the next 10 days, we expect to start pouring the first slab above grade. So we'll be putting the first floor of the garage in the next couple of weeks, which is a big step for us. So at the south end of the garage, you'll see slabs going in. At the north end of the garage, you're going to see the rest of the soil going, and then we'll be off and running with the garage construction. So we're moving well on the foundation. A lot of concrete being poured every day. The other thing, by the way, the other thing you see in that photograph, sorry, is the number of tower cranes. We now have 6 tower cranes up. People joke it looks like a crane store out there. We have 6 tower cranes. We have numerous track-mounted cranes. So on any given day, you probably got 20 cranes. That's why you see that people are starting to notice more because the cranes are so high up in the air, what's going on with the site. Next shot, that's the first steel going up. The central utility plant, otherwise known as the CUP, is not over the garage, so we could start that early for 2 reasons. One is, again, it isn't over the garage, so we could start early, but also we need to because that's how we're going to climate control the building. About a year before we open, we have to start climate controlling the building for the finishes. So we have to get this done and operable. So the steel is flying along on the CUP. Every night we bring in trucks of steel and organize it. During the day, they pick them and put them in place. And they're up, I'll show you a different photo in a minute, but they're up, way up on the 3rd floor, starting to work on that steel. This spring, we'll clad it, we'll roof it, and then we'll have it enclosed, and we'll start putting mechanicals in. So by next summer, this plant will actually be operable.
Chris, remind me, where is the central utility plant
You go back to the first
located
photo.
within the,
If you look at that photo, so you see the excavation, to orient you, the rail line is to the bottom of the page, and you see the rail cars full of soil.
right, is that on the north side of the site?
That's to the west, it's toward the shopping mall.
the west side.
The north would be to the left of this page, Charlestown would be to the right of this page, and Broadway would be the top of the page. The central utility plant is on the left-hand side, so it's north of the garage. It's the most northerly part of the project.
I see.
It's really where all the back of house is. It's where we'll have dining for employees, workshops, training areas, all the employee stuff is in that end of the building. That's the steel we talked about. If you go to the next shot, this is down in the hole. It's a little city down there. We have rock anchors going on. We have tiebacks going on. We have dewatering being put in. We have underslab plumbing being put in. But the big task is we have a tremendous amount of reinforcing bar being put in the hole. With a 5-foot thick slab, we have multiple layers of rebar. That has to be heated, and then all the concrete has to be pumped down into the hole. So we do about 2 slabs a week, and each one's about 450 concrete trucks. So we're running about 900 concrete trucks a week just for the mat slabs.
How many a week?
We usually do about 2 mat slabs a week,
So how many trucks of
about 900 concrete trucks.
Has this weather,
Wow.
Chris, slowed you down a bit?
Not really. We lost a little time on the steel because a lot of that's handwork, so we had to clear the snow and get them back doing that. The excavators didn't lose much time at all because the machines just didn't even notice the snow. They kept going. The concrete guys probably lost a little bit of time, but mainly that's because people couldn't drive to the job site. So we combined with 2 big snow days, we probably lost a day of productivity. Now, the schedule has snow days built into it. We're hoping not to use them, but we do have some weather delays in the schedule to provide us time. So a lot of work going on down in the hole. This is a shot that shows, tiebacks and drill rigs going with the rock anchors. Again, a lot of this is just details, but there's a tremendous amount of equipment down in the hole making progress. Next shot is the last tails of the excavation. As I mentioned, we have about 75,000 tons left. That sounds like a lot, but it's only a couple weeks more worth of work, and that will be all gone, and we'll be out of there. We're also in the busiest trucking season right now, as Bob mentioned, because we're overlapping the soil excavation with the concrete deliveries. So into March, we'll start to be actually having less traffic. So we've been doing this for 4 months, 5 months, and we haven't heard much of anything. So we think the traffic pattern has been able to handle the traffic flow. One issue that we do hear about, by the way, is these trucks do track dirt on Broadway. So we have a full-time street sweeper that goes back and forth, and generally, they keep up with it, but the only noise we've heard from anybody is a little bit of dirt in the street. Next one's another shot. Again, this is just more dirt, but you can see the magnitude of what they're digging out of there in the excavation. Also in the foreground, it's hard to see, but the columns for the hotel tower were already installed down to bedrock. All we're doing now is exposing them. So the columns are already there. So once we get all the soil out of there and start putting the slabs in, we can start on the hotel tower, and the foundation already exists.
Is that the structure to the right, or is that the base for a crane?
If you look, in the immediate foreground, that's the base for a crane.
Okay.
That's actually a temporary foundation for the next tower crane that since has been put up. But around it, and it's very hard to see at that scale, but it's even hard to point out, but right behind that tower crane and right before you see the excavator, there's some curved rebar that's sort of curled over. It looks like a U, upside-down U shape. Sorry, I know it's... It's right in the middle of that photo. That is one of 52 columns for the tower. So the foundation is already in. The good news is that'll mean the tower can go pretty quickly. Next shot is just a pouring concrete. We're also working on the waterfront. As you know, we have to replace the entire bulkhead, we have to dry piles, we have to put in the harbor walk. So we are far along in doing that. The sheathing went in quite quickly. We didn't have a lot of obstructions, which is good. The piles are going in now. The living shoreline work starts in a couple weeks, so we're in good shape. We also got there's a time of year restriction, which we were able to get a waiver from to keep working through the spring, which we'd wanted, which is good news. So there's a lot of work on the waterfront going on as we speak. Another shot of the waterfront. This is really where we're starting to smooth out the area where the harbor walk is going to go. We want to get the harbor walk in early because it's hard to do later. In other words, once the entire building is there, we really have to start working on the landscaping, the grading. So the harbor walk is a lot of big, heavy equipment, so we're trying to get that done early, or at least the basic bones of it done early, so we can get that equipment out of there and bring in the smaller equipment to work on the site work and landscaping. By the way, Jackie mentioned we're working on the permitting for the dredging. Dredging is a completely offshore activity, so the dredge, the barge and the dredge equipment will come from the river, they'll leave by the river, the soil leaves by the river, everybody comes and goes by the river, so no matter how far along the project is, we can do that in the inlet without affecting the landside operation at all.
And what's the timeline for dredging? How long does it
We
take?
would love to get started this fall. There's a time of year opportunity from September until February when we can dredge the inlet. We're hoping we get the permits in place to start this year. That would get it done 17, 18. If not, we do it 18, 19, but we really don't like it that close to the opening. It doesn't really affect the building at all, but it just seems cutting a little close. So we'd really like to do it this fall if we can. The actual dredging won't take long. It's probably 3 or 4 months' worth of work. So the work is not the hard part. It's lining up all the proper permits.
Chris, are you expecting some contaminated soil on the dredging, coming out of the dredging operation?
Some of the worst. Yeah, a lot of the stuff came out, what Monsanto did is they had 3 outlets that came off the site, and anything goes. Everything went out through the outlets, and that's set in sediment. A lot of it's heavy metals, so it resides, it hasn't gone anywhere. Sometimes this stuff sloshes around the river. A lot of the heavy metals have stayed right where they started. So we've done tremendous amounts of borings in the inlet. We've got about 7 acres of area that we've got to deal. Some will be dredged, some will be done with a natural remediation, but yes, there will be more bad stuff in the river. And we're not taking credit for this, but it's going to make a huge difference to the river. Because that area right now is, I think you've heard this before, but we did a biological survey with a little robot, and the report said that it was a biological desert, which meant they found nothing alive in the inlet.
They're single-cell amoebas.
Single-cell amoebas.
Single-cell amoebas.
I stand corrected. But the theory is pretty simple. I mean, all the biologists have told us, once you clean it up, the life will come back. I mean, so we think that'll be a good thing. This is just an example of some of the equipment down there. This is stress testing. I mentioned we have to do about 1,600 tiebacks, rock anchors. Everyone has to be tested, everyone has to be grouted. This is why it takes so long to do a big building, because every day, 3 shifts, somebody's out there doing this kind of testing. The next sheet is just sort of a summary sheet, but to remind you where we are. Pre-excavation for guide walls is done. The slurry wall is done. About 97% of the tiebacks are done. They'll be done in the next couple weeks. These are the tiebacks that hold the wall up. 90% of the cap beams, these are the beams that sit on top of the piles, are done. 60% of the mass excavation, that number is higher as we sit here. It's probably in the 70s now since we printed these slides. Precast piles are done. About 78% of the pile caps are done. Mini piles are done, and we're starting on the B4 mat slab, and we've started all the waterfront work. So it's very early on, but right now we're on schedule. Things are going well. Knock on wood, we've been happy with the work so far. Bob's going to talk transportation, and I think later on I'm going to come back and talk a bit about schedule.
Thanks, Chris. I did want to spend a minute on what we call this Transportation Mitigation Communication Plan. I also, for anyone on the commission staff that hasn't met Greg, Greg, wave. Greg is our Executive Director of Brand Marketing, and
They both waved.
oh, John as well. All right. Greg is obviously our communications specialist on the team, and he worked to put together this plan, which I'm going to give you the highlights of. And also, as you know, Greg works closely with Elaine on the commission staff, because there's going to have to be very close communication all the way through our road work mitigation project, because I think sometimes we'll get communications. I think other people may not know who to contact, so they may contact the commission directly. So we'll make sure we establish that link between Greg and Elaine to make sure this goes smoothly. But I know this was an area that the commission was particularly interested in. We thought it was worthwhile doing a full run-through on this today. So the next, actually the next slide, I'd like to go to the actual map. That's okay. This particular map is actually kind of interesting because it's a sort of a 30,000-foot view of all the work that we've got to do. And if you look at the kind of the long blue arrow, that represents Broadway, basically from Sweetser Circle down to Sullivan Square. And that is obviously the main area of work that we're going to do. However, we also have another stretch that goes from Sweetser back to Wellington, which is almost as much work. The real heavy lifting is Broadway and Sullivan, but the other changes that we're going to make at Wellington, Santilli, and Sweetser, I think are just as important, even though they don't involve as much heavy lifting in terms of construction. So really, we have two large sections that we're dealing with almost simultaneously. And if we go to the next slide, this is our overall communications approach. And while I don't normally read, I think it's important for me to put this one in the record because it's really important for what we're going to be doing over the next year. And that is our total objective with this plan. And that's to provide a timely and consistent flow of outgoing and incoming communications to inform residents and commuters of the transportation work related to Wynn Boston Harbor and lessen the inconvenience and traffic generated by the work. So that was basically our overall starting point of what this entire effort was all about. And on the next slide, we talk a little bit about how we're going to do this. So outgoing from us, providing advanced and real-time notices regarding road closures, lane shutdowns, and of course incoming from what the residents and the commuters have comments on. As you know, most of this work now is going to reside more in the world of electronic communication. And we think that's going to be critical. So as part of this process, you'll see on the next, and by the way, I'm sorry, there are two companies that are assisting us in this process. AECom, I think we've mentioned this at previous meetings, AECom got all of the transportation work except for Sullivan Square, and Howard Stein Hudson has all the work that we're doing in Sullivan Square. Those are the two leads. So what happens is those design firms actually will be working with Chris and his team to make sure that we know in advance when the schedule changes are coming, and then this information can be communicated back through both Regina Villa Associates, who's been hired by AECom, as well as Greg and his internal team at Wynn. And so we'll have a constant communication flow between those companies, us, and the transportation communication company that's been put on the job as well. The next slide, with anything transportation related, the key is to keep it simple. I mean, the last thing you want to do is confuse the public, confuse residents or commuters, and so we're gonna try to keep this very simple. Here's today's road closures, here's what we've got to do, here's where we're moving lanes, and simple works in this kind of communication. If you look at the next slide, this is what we call our communications channels. So we're going to have a dedicated website, which we're going to brand as well. And then it'll be Facebook and Twitter. It'll be text messaging. We'll use the city alert programs and traffic apps. As far as PR and paid media, we'll do a press kickoff event. We'll do traffic reports, electronic billboards and ads, and intersection signing through LEDs. And then direct outreach, we're going to have a 24-hour hotline set up. And our goal through all of this is to make sure that we communicate quickly and efficiently with people. Matter of fact, next slide. This shows you one example of how we can, again, use electronic communication. Most of you know the Everett United Citizens Group that's been involved in our project from day one. They operate under a branding of Win for All, has been a website that they've used very effectively to keep the residents informed. So that's one of the channels that we'll be able to use besides our own website, which we're going to craft that'll be specifically dedicated to this project. The next slide. There are now very good ways that we can communicate using the Mass DOT's website. Waze is very good about this, about helping to post when there are traffic difficulties. I know most of the folks in the room probably use that. There's another Signal Alert, Total Traffic Network, Google, and then in fact the local radio stations and other communications vehicles that we can notify so they can broadcast that out on the networks. The next slide shows potential signage, LED and intersection signage that we could do along the way, as well as the next slide gives us some examples of, communications. Part of this is traffic notification. Part of it is, when people get inconvenienced for traffic movements, I think they want to know that there's something coming. And so part of this is a bit of, this is going to be good for the community, it'll help your commute at a later date, more jobs are going to be created, and overall, it's got a good economic development impact. And part of the reason that we integrate the marketing communications folks in with the construction folks is to make sure that we treat this as a true branding exercise, because that's really what this is. The next slide gives you
Bob,
another
excuse me,
example.
Excuse me, what
Yes.
is the Mystic Mile? Is
The
that-
Mystic Mile is how we are going to brand this. Many of the large road and infrastructure projects that have been done over the years, most of the time, they come up with a handle. So in our particular case, what we did was we looked at, you think back to that first map I showed you, and I'm going to use some liberties here with mileage. But if you look at the mile that's really in front of our property, if you go from like Sweetser Circle down to Sullivan Square, it's really probably 1.5 miles, but that didn't sound very good on a website. So if you brand something like that, we're going to call it the Mystic Mile, and we're thinking of the mile that goes really on the Parkway and the mile that goes on Broadway. Those two are really the main sections. So Greg is going to be developing a new website that'll be specifically focused on traffic improvements and mitigation. And we'll point everyone towards that, so that they don't have to go, onto Wynn Boston Harbor and then select construction and then select traffic. So we can actually direct people right to the site that they are used to. And that's very common in large infrastructure projects. You develop a handle and you develop a site that's dedicated to it. So that's why we picked that.
Thank you.
Great. And then there's another slide of, again, mobile signage that we can do at any of the intersections. And then I mentioned earlier about managing communications. Our whole goal is to make sure that we can respond within 24 hours to just about any call. So that'll be both the hotline that's called in, or if somebody emails us, we want to make sure that we're getting back to people very quickly, and we'll have a tracking system to look after that. So again, I know that's a lot of information, but I know it was important to the commission. It's going to be important to Everett and Boston and Medford and Malden, all the surrounding communities. So it's something that we are going to dedicate time and resource to. Okay. I'm going to turn it back over to Chris for schedule.
Okay? Thanks, Bob. I'm not going to walk you through every bar of the schedule, although I'm happy to if you want to, but there's a summary schedule attached. But let me just talk more generally about it, if that would help. As I mentioned a minute ago, right now we are on schedule. The concrete and the excavation is on schedule. The steel is actually ahead of schedule. I want to caution, though, we've got 2 years left to go, so I don't want to be overconfident and say we've just, we're done. So as we sit here today, we're very happy with where we are. A lot of work to be done, a lot of tricky work to be done, but we don't see big problems. In other words, we've got the buyout. It's probably 3/4 done now with the subcontractors. Glass is being made in Germany. Steel's being made right now. We've got finished materials starting to be made. Exterior panels are being made. So there's factories all over the world that are making stuff for us as we speak right now. We're in those locations. We're testing materials. The site is working out well. Logistics are starting to really work. We've just widened the entrance to 5 lanes, if you've seen it. The MBTA moved their entrance, so now we've got a 5-lane road coming in, which gives us a lot of activity, a lot of access, I should say. So the service road is operable. So a lot of the pieces we were worried about are in place. So again, I'm happy to go through the schedule in detail if you want, but right now we're satisfied where we are. A year from now, the tower will be up and it'll be mostly clad. So a year from now, you'll see the entire podium area, the steel will be built, the entire tower will be up to the full height, and the glass will be almost all the way up the tower. So just to give you a year glimpse ahead of time. And a year from that, it'll be primarily done because Bob will be starting to break in the building. So we've got some big activities coming up.
Chris, perhaps just in general, could you describe the critical path in the next few quarters? What are the activities that?
Yeah, the critical path has always been the podium, the casino area, the ballroom area, the meeting rooms, the food and beverage. It's not individually, it's not difficult, but there's a lot of it. The hotel, believe it or not, is relatively predictable. In other words, we're going to do what's called golden rooms. So soon we're going to be building 3 model rooms on the 5th floor, which are going to be used for a mock-up. They're an in-situ mock-up. Instead of going 20 miles away and building a mock-up, we're going to build them in the building. and everybody's going to go through them, sign off on them, Bob's team, operating folks, they're going to say, ready to go. Then the tower moves pretty well. It goes a floor a week. So the concrete goes a floor a week, the framing, the mechanicals, the plumbing, all that goes a floor a week. So, we don't see that. I don't want to be, too arrogant about it, but we think the hotel tower is going to move along pretty well. The cup will be done ahead of time. That's not a problem. The site work will be fine. The critical path will be through the podium, through the casino, through the ballroom, through the lobby, the food and beverage, the restaurants, all that stuff is a lot of finicky detail work. So we see that as the area we really got to make sure hits the schedule.
Focus, yep. Great.
At the AOC meetings, Jenny always has a great piece of her presentation which shows kind of when you're spiking in terms of building trade needs. And obviously, from our meeting the other day, it looks like April is when there's a huge push to have a
Yeah.
number of the trades, infiltrating the site. So that's always a great gauge for me beyond this schedule in terms of where you're looking at the construction schedule, but it's.
Well, I'll give you an example. In the last month, we've awarded 12 more big subcontract packages, and they're all going to be coming on this summer. So if you're out there today, you'd find between 300 and 350 workers. If you're out there in the spring, you'd probably find 500. You're out there in the summer, you could find as many as 1,000. So it is ramping up quickly. For example, the excavation looks big, but it's not many people. It's, a couple hundred people. When you start doing, many floors of concrete, a lot of steel, and with the finishes, for example, that's where we're going to see a lot of people. So I would say this summer, we'd like to get up over 1,000 workers this summer, and then it'll go up from there. And it'll peak, it'll peak in 18, and we say it's going to drop off, but, it's going to drop off before we open, but it's not going to drop off that quickly.
Chris, any significant surprises in the site work?
Yes. Asbestos. We thought we knew, we did 2,000 borings, and we thought we knew everything about the site, and we found additional asbestos that we didn't anticipate. That threw us quite a monkey wrench. We had to find a landfill that would take it, which ended up being in Georgia. So we had to take a huge amount of soil all the way to Georgia, and that's not easy. So we had that threw quite a monkey wrench into it. We also found more of the contaminants than we thought. The good news was both our general contractor, who was Suffolk, and our soil work contractor, Dorenzo, figured it out, and they managed to get it done. But that was the biggest surprise we found. Other than that, it's just the usual daily stuff. There's a pipe where you thought there wasn't a pipe and that kind of stuff. But there haven't been any other big issues. But the level of contamination, even after all the work we'd done, was a little bit more than we thought.
Was it in one area or throughout that you found the?
Well, it was concentrated. For example, we found a 3-story underground area with furnaces in it with asbestos pipes all through it. We found areas where they had dumped stuff, literally had created a little area and dumped it. So it was spread around, but there were some areas of big concentration. Some of the photographs are unbelievable, and you've seen underground structures. But the good news is it's all gone. And a lot of the neighbors have been, in awe. They said that junk was there for 100 years, now it's all gone. So it's taken care of.
Remarkable.
I'm going to turn now to the project resources and diversity part of the plan. As you know, Jenny's been our lead. She's here today and camping out, going to the Access and Opportunities Committee meetings, and doing a good job kind of leading the charge for the organization. I wanted to, though, give you an update as to where we were as of December 31st. So in the first section on the design phase, we had goals for the MBEs of 7.9%. We actually exceeded that goal and came in about 8.8%. In the area of the WBEs, we had a goal of 10. We're short on that one. We're at 4.9. And I want to spend a minute on that because I think it was Commissioner McDonald asked me at the last meeting if we could do anything to possibly pump that number up. So although we're almost done with the design phase, there are a couple small items that are left. We have to do some design work for our retail stores. And then also we created some, what would you say, Chris, a few small change orders recently?
Some refinements.
Some refinements that might need some additional design work done, and the team is going to try to divert that resource if we can to see if we can find some other WBEs that could add to the design number. So certainly we're cognizant of that, and I just wanted to get back to you, Commissioner, on that, that we're going to make that effort to see if we get that number up a little bit for the rest of the job. We did very well under the veteran goal. The VBE goal was 1%. We came in at 7.2. So overall, we exceeded We had a goal of 8.9, and we came in at right now, about 20.9% of the work, and we'll try to see if we can squeeze a little bit more out of that on the design side, but we are just about done in that area. The next is in the area of the actual contracts for the job. So in this particular case, we've awarded somewhere a little bit north, I think, of about $400 million as of December 31st for the qualified spend in this section of the presentation. We had a goal on MBEs of 5%, and we're right now hovering around 5.6%. On WBEs, 5.4% goal, and we're at 4.1. However, Jenny told me that there's some action going on there and I took a sneak peek at the January 31st report that I think was just reported on at Access and Opportunities, and I think we are now above the goal. I think we were hovering around 5.8. So there's been some progress on the WBE front, on the contract side, and on the veteran side, the VBEs, we had a goal of 1%, and we're killing that one. We're up at 5.7. So overall, the goal was 11.4, and we're currently at 12.9. And again, staying pretty much focused on that as we go through the bid process. The next area is actually in construction workforce. So in this particular case, our minority goal is 15.3%, and we're currently averaging about 24%. So we're well exceeding the goal on the minority front. On the women front, our goal is 6.9. As of December 31st, we were at 6.5, and I took a look at January. It actually edged up a little bit. We're at about 6.6 on the female side, and that's an area where we're gonna put some more focus on that as well. We're gonna have another session with John Fish and the team and see if Suffolk can really help us out and work on the women's side of the equation there. On the veteran goal, we're at 3% goal, and we're currently hovering at about 5.5. So we're overall across the whole project, I think we're doing extremely well in this particular area, and it's thanks to Jenny and Chris and the team on the construction side that's really been pushing this along.
Bob,
yes.
before you move off the diversity, I know you guys just had a pretty successful kind of FF&E vendor event. Is the FF&E being considered as part of the construction phase?
Yes.
All those
Yeah,
costs?
those purchases will be underneath the goals that we already have established. And by the way, that was a great event. I think we had about 200 companies?
There was over 150 companies and 200 people.
That came to that event. We brought the procurement team out from Vegas. We had them do a pretty good outline of what it takes to be a Win vendor, because we have, obviously, you can imagine with Mr. Win and Roger Thomas's design work, very exacting standards for what we're looking for. And so we want anyone who's going to approach the job to go in eyes wide open for what the expectations are. Vendor registration, it takes a village to get all the way through the process, as you know. And we want to make sure that those folks know what they're dealing with. But we got a great response from a lot of good local vendors, but that'll be all built up. That's within the construction numbers.
Okay. And I only mention that. I mean, I looked at, and we had this question the other day at the AOC meeting, knowing that you're wrapping up the design phase. I'm happy to hear there may be some final design work out there, but somewhat disappointed we missed the women, the WBE mark by as much as we did. So hearing your interest and your goal of focusing on the WBE participation in the next phase. And I know most of the work done to this point has been very specialized, but when you start getting to building and fit out in FF&E, hopefully we can increase those numbers.
Absolutely, and we're going to remain focused on that. Okay. The next section, we'd like to give you an update as far as community outreach. We mentioned earlier about the event last night, which will really be reported on in our next quarterly update. But we had quite a bit of activity in December. You can see on the 6th, we had a meeting with the Chinatown community organizations. We had a career place update December 7th. We had our quarterly update with the Hispanic American Institute December 14th. That's yielded some very good results. We had a presentation of the Mass Small Business Association, the Metro North Regional Employment Board, and Building Pathways, which has really expanded nicely into the Everett community. And so we're trying to make some strides on that as well, all the way through. And next is some photos from some of the events. The first is the event that we had down in Chinatown. The next is one of our very stylish construction hats, I might add.
That was the Veterans event.
Very, very nicely done. The next is some folks on the site, the veterans, you can see here, honoring all those who have served, and we'd love to get those veterans on the work. The next is the Women at Work. As you know, we've taken a very active role, Girls in Trades, which Jenny co-chairs, and we're going to, there's been some follow-up on that as well, and we are going to continue to try to push for women to join in the construction field. So that really concludes all of the official comments, right, guys?
Yeah.
I think we're there, so we're ready to answer any questions that the commission might have.
But remind me the date of the notice of project change that you spoke about in terms of permitting, Jackie?
Well, our goal is to have it filed February 28th.
February 28th. Just to add to Bruce's comment, I look forward to the changes that are part of that. I know you've mentioned, certain programming things that you've refined, so we'd love to hear them.
We'll set up a meeting to make sure that you're fully up to speed on that.
Thank you.
One of the attachments we had was a letter dated the end of the year talking about your quarterly report and budget. Land acquisition, at that time, you showed about $6 million left in land acquisition. Do we know what that's going towards, or what's left to purchase?
I haven't got the sheet in front of me. That may be related to roadway improvements, because we have some small right-of-ways we're working on.
Okay.
And again, I haven't seen that, so I'm guessing, but we've not completed a number of small roadway areas we need for the roadway improvements.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions for the team?
No, just a comment. I think, the size of the project, we knew it from the beginning, but now seeing it, coming to fruition, the size and the effort, the number of tons of dirt and concrete that you're pouring is really quite something, and you are on track and on schedule, which is really good news in
Yes.
my book. So,
Yeah.
good effort.
Thank you.
And I really like the communication strategy, those roadway signs to let people know, so they're not any more aggravated than they already are in Boston traffic.
Yes.
So I thought that was a good way to let people know exactly what's going on, and better things are coming. So those positive messages were,
They're important as we go through this, because it's a little pain for some gain at the end, but I think the pain will be worth it with some better roadways.
agreed. Thank you. Excellent presentation.
Commissioners.
Thank you.
Thank you. So Commissioners, next up on the agenda is the Plain Ridge Park quarterly report for the same final quarter of 2016. Let me ask the Plain Ridge representatives to come join us. And I think we need 4 seats. We need 1 additional chair. Okay, would you just rejoin us in a second, Joe? So joining us today, we have Lance George, Plain Ridge Park General Manager. Welcome to Mr. Reuben Warren, CFO for Plain Ridge Park, Lisa McKinney, Compliance Manager, and Eli Heward, Purchasing Manager. So when the team is ready, I will let them roll.
We're going to confuse Eli with Julian Edelman pretty soon.
That's okay.
It's a healthy patch of hair.
Yeah.
Jump right in.
Yes, please.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Let's start with employment, as we typically do. Employment, no significant changes from previous updates in this area. Full-time, part-time mix remains largely consistent, currently sitting at 66-34, and the number of employees continues to remain about 500, 490 as of the end of December, and I believe that number sits just over 500 as of yesterday, so about 500 seems to be our number. Additional information on the composition of Plain Ridge's workforce. Continued good news in the area of diversity. That number continues to climb. At the end of Q4, the property was at 21%, exceeding a goal of 10%. In addition, Massachusetts residents comprise 70% of Plain Ridge Park's workforce. Results today have been encouraging, particularly in the area of diversity. Additional detail on this slide as well. Male-female ratio of 51 to 49, and veteran hiring at 3%.
Excuse me, Lance, the local figure of 35%, that represents an improvement as well, doesn't it?
That number has gone up from the previous update. Yes, sir.
Lance, before you leave employment, I know that the casino industry is particularly sensitive to the turnover, just because of the nature of the 24-hour operation. And that's also true for the first year of almost any operation. Have you seen a turnover trend down?
Yeah,
a
it
little
certainly
bit?
has. Open rec report, this is the lowest number that we've had since opening. From a stability standpoint, things feel a heck of a lot better than they did 18, 19 months ago. Recruiting, I don't know that we have any significant positions open. We'll always have some positions open in the food and beverage area, which I would guess comprises probably 90% of the open positions at this point. So certainly things have stabilized. We'll always see some turnover in those transient positions, particularly in the area of food and beverage. But yeah, overall, things have calmed down.
Great.
Turn it over to Ruben for the next few slides.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Morning.
Our fourth quarter net slot revenues came in at $37 million. That's about a 4% increase over fourth quarter 2015. Our state taxes were slightly under $15 million. Our contribution to the horse racing industry was at $3.3 million, and total taxes came in at $18.3 million for the fourth quarter. Overall, for the year of 2016, total revenues are slightly under $155 million. State taxes right at $62 million. Horse racing taxes are at $13.9 million in total taxes for 2016. We finished at $17.9 million.
75.
75.9, yes, if I didn't say that right. Next slide, our state spend for the fourth quarter. Our total spend was $1.9 million, and the state of Massachusetts contribution was right at $1.4 million, or 73% of the total spend in the fourth quarter.
Is this generally a figure that has remained stable? Remind me, from prior reports, this seems about the level that you have accomplished in prior quarters. Is that a fair statement?
1.4 million in the third quarter, so slightly up in the fourth quarter.
I was more thinking of the distribution, the 73-27.
Yes, it's been about the same margins, I believe. Eli, on the prior spends, I think it's not fluctuating too much from a percentage standpoint.
Fluctuated a couple of percentages. This is actually one of the higher percentage points so far, but right around between 67 to 73% seems to be about the range that we're at.
Very good.
I think it's also important to note, and Eli, correct me if I'm wrong, because we've talked about this, even though you have distributions going to other states, that may mean money that is actually spent in-state in Massachusetts. You're just cutting a check to the company's location in another state. So that percentage of what's being spent with mass vendors and with mass companies is probably a little bit higher than the 1.4.
Yeah, that's correct. We're working on updating we have updated our vendor welcome packet that collects all the data to include the local shop as well as the remit to address. We can roll that into our report, as well as going back to collecting that data from our existing vendors to include those in the reports for future reporting.
Okay,
So we'll have those updated for the first quarter 2017.
that'd be great.
For our local spend, I think the same story. There's vendors that sit in the state and the neighborhoods, but has a corporate headquarters, and those numbers aren't represented in these. We'll fix that for the first quarter 17 as well. But for fourth quarter 2016, 141,000 was our local spend, and for Plainville, 89,000 or 64% was the largest portion of that spend. Our diversity spend for the fourth quarter, the goals, our total diversity spend, the goal is 21%. For the fourth quarter, we were at a 29% percent for total spend overall. For women-owned businesses, we met the goal of 12%. For minority-owned businesses, we finally exceeded that goal at 14%. And for veteran-owned businesses, we finished at 5%, slightly above the 3% mark.
Was there any significant reason for that big jump in MBE?
We had a project for LED lighting on the property, and we procured a minority-owned business to supply those, the supplies for that project.
Okay, great.
Fourth quarter stats, overall, the total spend for our diversity, was $500,000. That's about 0.25% of the total spend, with women-owned businesses coming in at $164,000, minority-owned at $250,000, and veteran-owned at $87,000. Any other questions on diversity?
Actually, I had a question going back to the local spend,
Yes.
pie chart there. I'm just curious, that Plainville has an impressive 64% share there. What are the major components of that spend?
Let Eli.
So going back to that lighting project, the materials were supplied by a minority-owned business. The installer who actually installed the lights came from Plainville, so we sourced a local contractor to come in and do the actual work. And a footnote to that, we worked with Penn National Gaming. He was a gentleman he was a gentleman who was kind of helping us through the project, kind of overseeing it as a advisor. He came back to us and said that the contractor who we were working with was one of the best that he's had the opportunity to work with, and we were lucky to have him on board as one of our vendors, so kudos to him on that.
Thank you.
Great.
I'll turn it over to Lisa for compliance.
Good morning, Commissioners.
Good morning.
Good morning, Lisa.
This slide is the lottery sales, and as you can see, in the fourth quarter for 2016, we have 748, and then we increased our sales by 56% from fourth quarter in 2015, and total overall sales for 2016 is $2.9 million. It is a growing piece of our business. We've helped the surrounding areas increase their lottery sales as well.
Any ideas why that's a very large jump in percentage? What's your strategy there?
I'll let Ruben answer that.
So in meeting with the group from the lottery, we do our best to strategically place the machines on the floor in the right places. The ones that are underperforming will move to new locations, and we think we found the right spot for those, mainly at our main entrances and in high-traffic areas. So we've worked with the Lottery Commission to help us through what's selling and what's not.
So as people exit, they're buying a ticket?
Up on entry and exit.
Wow. Go
Thank-
figure.
Go figure.
You're there to try your luck, right?
Moving on to compliance with regulations. This slide, we did update for you from the previous presentation. This slide used to only include underage information. Now it includes minors as well. So during the quarter, we had over 26,000 ID checks, and that's all ID checks coming into the property. Of the 26,000 ID checks, 602 were prevented from entering the gaming establishment, and 56 of them were minors, and 91 are underage. We did actually have one minor get on the gaming floor and game, one underage on the gaming floor and game. And it's the same individual, as you can see there, that we removed, found on the gaming
Is-
floor and removed.
The minors must have fictitious IDs?
That was a very good fake ID, yes.
It was a good one.
Lisa, if I'm reading this right, the 602 people were prevented from entering the establishment, right?
Correct.
Okay, of that, 56 were minors and 91 were underage.
What's the rest?
That's about 100. What were the 500 others? Why were they?
The 500 others are either invalid IDs, expired IDs, or people that do not have IDs.
Okay, so it's basically ID-driven?
Yes. Our policy is basically to check anybody who's coming in the door that looks under the age of 30.
Again, that's very good interception there with only one individual.
Thank you.
That's great.
And I'm going to turn it back over to Lance.
Well,
Wrap it up.
before you go, Lisa,
Oh,
I
sorry.
was surprised not to see any entry here for suspicious activity reports. Do you have any figures on that?
Suspicious activity report?
Right.
I actually am the one that does file them, but I don't have any stats with me at this point in time, but I can be more than happy
Maybe
to
in the future, we
provide
could
them.
incorporate those, because, money laundering concerns are very significant.
Sure.
More than happy to add
Yeah.
that for the next update. That
That's a
certainly
good-
falls under Lisa's purview.
That's a good ad. No? Oh.
Last couple slides. Good work going on in the local community. Charitable giving. Plain Ridge continues to give back to several charities surrounding us. Toys for Tots, the local YMCA, the town of Mansfield, the Lions Club. In addition, we sponsored the Adopt a Highway program. So a lot of good work, a lot of charitable giving, a lot of good corporate citizenship. Partnerships for Q4. Guessing everybody wants to partner with the Patriots, as we did as well. AFC Championship ticket packages to many of our customers. We acquired a billboard that is located at Patriot Place. In addition, for New Year's Eve, we partnered with the Renaissance Hotel for stay and play packages. We were the sponsor for Frozen Fenway for the hockey tournament that occurred here locally. And in addition, we partnered with Rentham Outlets, which is local to us.
So your lucky patrons who got those championship tickets must have been thrilled.
Yes, yes,
That
they
was
were.
It was a great game, although the Super Bowl was better.
Depends on point of view. It's all point of view driven.
We realize you're not local.
Marketing, as we look back at what occurred in Q4, racing loyalty program rolled out for our racing customers. Dunkin' Donuts finally rolled out, that I believe opened on 12/9, off to a great start in both December and January as well. The majority of their sales are likely employee sales. I see a lot of energetic folks at the office now. Veterans Day, we fed all active and former veterans. Toys for Tots, we partnered with the Mass Partnership for Responsible Gaming. And then finally, a lot going on as it relates to, or as it related to New Year's Eve celebration.
So the Dunkin' Donuts is operating?
Yes, it opened December 9th.
How is the response?
Great, great, great partner, easy to work with, off to a fantastic start with us.
Can you, Lance, talk a little bit about the racing rewards program, how
Yep.
that might mirror your gaming rewards card on the other side of the?
Sure does,
building?
ties directly. So not only will folks earn points and comps for the casino activity, they'll earn the same thing for their racing activity, and it crosses over. They can use it at any outlet around the facility, and so it is based on their racing activity. We will reinvest back into them a certain percentage, regardless win, lose, draw, but based on their activity, they're earning points and they're earning comps towards the outlets.
And you use it at other Penn facilities that have racing attached to it?
Yeah, so we We're the second property to roll out this program. Our property in Mahoning in Ohio rolled it out first, worked through many of the kinks, so we are the second facility to roll it out in Penn. Good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Questions?
Thank you.
Thanks.
Well,
Yeah, thank you. Excellent report.
well done.
One more item, John?
Right. So, Commissioners, the next up for consideration is the 2017 Community Mitigation Fund applications. My purpose here today is to just give you a brief overview of the process that we're going to take to review these applications. I'm not planning to get into detail regarding any one of the applications. Indeed, the review teams have yet to meet, but I just wanted to remind the commissioners and remind those in our audience what our review process will be. So as you'll see in your packet, we have a memo that summarizes a little bit what I'm talking about, but gives you a little detail regarding the applications we received and matches up what applications we received versus our targets that we set when we established the 2017 guidelines back in December. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to sort of work backwards a little bit. What we're hoping to do is have determinations regarding these grant applications well before the new fiscal year 2018, which would begin on July 1st. What we're hoping to do is get decisions well before that date so we can put municipalities and others in the best possible situation that they can from a planning perspective so that they know what dollars are coming in and that they can plan accordingly. So more immediately, in order to reach that date, what we're going to next do is we're going to establish where we're going to convene our meeting team, our review team. Our review team is expanded from last year. The review team right now includes myself, Joe Delaney, Mary Thurlow, and before I go on, I just wanted to congratulate Mary on her new title. Mary is now the program manager for the Ombudsman's Office with a focus on the Community Mitigation Fund. She has been doing a tremendous amount of work in making sure that all of our contracts are up to speed, program documents are up to speed. Paul, everything in the office is really sort of up to snuff and organized, and congratulations, Mary.
Yeah.
Yes.
Mayor,
Well,
nice job.
well-deserved.
Well
I've had the
deserved.
opportunity to work with the committee and always well-prepared. The work is superb, so congratulations.
I'm not sure that if Mary was drinking a glass of water, John could talk.
Wow. Wow.
It's that efficient.
good.
huh?
Very good. Derek Lennon, we also have Catherine Blue as part of our team. Jill Griffin is joining our team this year. Specifically, we have a number of workforce development pilot program applications to review. And most notably, we are joined by Commissioner McDonald this year to help us in our reviews. As you know, Commissioner McDonald is the Commission's appointee to the Community Mitigation Subcommittee, has been attending a lot of the local community mitigation advisory committees, and we are very pleased that the Commissioner will be able to join us this year. He'll see all of the back and forth that happens on all of these applications. So, almost immediately, what we will then do is we're going to reach out to the licensees. As the commission knows, we ask the licensees their opinions of these applications. We're going to be a little bit more robust with our conversations with our licensees so that we can get sort of expansive comments this year to help us in our reviews, to see how the applications mesh up with the expectations of each of the licensees, and to see the relation between casino impacts and the impacts that are being asked to be mitigated. We also reached out to the regional planning agencies for their input, and what we're hoping to do there is we're hoping to see how these applications may mesh up with regional plans that the regional planning agencies are taking a look at, what other reviews the regional planning agencies have done on the specific item, a transportation review, another type of review, and hopefully we get some pretty robust comments. As we did last year, we will put all of the applications on a very specific part of our website, and we will ask the general public and any other entities that want to submit comments on these applications to submit them. The review teams will take those into consideration. Indeed, we did last year, and they will all be forwarded to the commission as well for its review once the final review product reaches the commission. After the internal reviews, we will invite the applicants to meet with the review team. We will go over our questions, anything that we might have missed or that we misunderstood. It gets fleshed out in those meetings. Following those meetings, we then submit a written series of questions to each of the applicants. They are then asked to submit a document back to us, which becomes part of the packet for the commission. After that, and indeed, before that meeting that we have with the applicants, we welcome any questions that the commissioners have. And what I would recommend is that if any individual commissioner or commissioners have questions, that just forward those to me, and then we can incorporate those into those meetings. And obviously, the commissioners will have a lot more questions once the recommendations go to the commission. What we try to do as a review team is we try to anticipate questions that the commissioners would ask, but to the degree that you have any questions at the early stage, we can incorporate those. And obviously, the bulk of much of your questions will occur once we put together some reviews. So, and then,
John, if we chose to do that, do you have a timeline in mind of when you would like to have those questions to you?
we would definitely like those before we meet with the applicants. I'll make the commission aware when we're scheduling those. We have some steps immediately of just reviewing the applications for completeness and other things over the next few weeks and putting together those questions, but I'll send out an email to the commissioners explaining the schedule and when we're likely to start meeting with applicants.
Okay.
And we keep obviously all of the applicants informed as we go throughout that process.
Okay.
So then, once we complete our staff review, then we bring these recommendations to the commission for its review at one or more meetings. I think we had probably 1 or 2 or 3 meetings last time. I would imagine it'll be the same this year. Following our award decisions, then we enter the contracting process. We try to get out the contracts very, very quickly after we make the award decisions so that the spending can fall very quickly thereafter. I just wanted to note a couple items from the applications for your consideration. In the memo, I note that we received a joint application from Revere and Saugus. During the course of our RFP process, we did get a number of questions on whether or not joint applications were part of the mitigation fund guidelines. We noted that they were not, and we provided a means for people to actually submit a joint application without it actually being a joint application. One entity could submit an application and make reference to another application. But we did get a joint application here from Revere and Saugus. But because it's $150,000, which is the limit for one community, I don't see that this is a major derivation from our guidelines. And I don't know if the commission has any thoughts about that.
Not at this point. I think the process that you described, which is very thoughtful and very methodical, could flesh out any additional details from them. I did have a question on the process. Is there any further input from the local community mitigation advisory committees?
No.
We're done at this point from
No, so
input?
what the committees, the way that we've established this for a number of different reasons, ethics rules and other rules, the local committees, they provide input on the guidelines themselves.
Yep.
And indeed, we're starting to work on the 2018 guidelines with the local committees, but they don't actually opine on applications that their neighbors submit or that they submit.
Right.
And we think that that's probably, a really good course to follow. It's really up to us. Any community can submit any comment through our process, through our website, and we will review that. But in terms of going to the committees themselves for their input on the applications, that's not part of our process.
Right. Thank you.
I also wanted to mention that we did not receive an expected application from the sheriff's office for their second year of lease assistance. That's something that we will take into consideration in the review teams and try to determine what that means. But in many ways, This may not be as substantial an issue as it may appear because the way that our application process follows, we have applications by statute every February 1st. And to the degree that we can make awards starting after February 1st of 2018, our awards could actually occur during fiscal year 2018. So to the degree, if the commission was inclined to provide lease assistance for the next fiscal year for the sheriff's office, potentially after review by the commission, the lease assistance could be provided during the fiscal year. So in essence, there would not potentially be a gap there in the lease assistance if we believe that it is a worthy purpose. That is something that's totally up for review, but I just wanted to mention that as an item.
Is that the Hampden County Sheriff, John?
That's correct. Yep. That's correct. So unless any of the other members have anything to offer, I think that's a general overview. We haven't gotten into how the application, I included for your review of what our expectations were versus what we received. And for certain categories, we received more than our allotment, but that's all part of what our review teams will discuss over the next weeks and months. And, we'll come back to the commission for recommendations on all of those items.
Yeah, well, I think it's a very thoughtful and methodical process, and I look forward to those recommendations. I want to emphasize something that you mentioned briefly relative to some of the merits of these projects and the relationship to the perceived or existing or potential problem, if you will. And let me mention something else before that. It is of course their job, the local officials' job, to try to get as much money as possible that may be out there for local projects. But of course, our charter is to make sure that it's related to the casino and it's something that is really a need, again, perceived or potential, and that's where the judgment call becomes really important. Just reading the first pass, and I know we're going to get a lot more details on these, there's a couple of requests that seem a bit of a stretch. Let me just, in terms of the relationship to the casino, I look forward to understanding, more details, but there may be very meritorious projects locally, and again, I'm not going to speak to anyone in particular, but we need to continuously think about the needs that might show up later on, or we know are perhaps a really big need where we need to cooperate with other agencies, other state agencies, for example. And that's always the trickiest part, of course.
You're right, Commissioner, it's very tricky, but in many ways, what you just said amplifies a lot of the concerns and comments that we did receive from the local community mitigation advisory committees and the subcommittee on community mitigation, whereby they noted that it probably makes sense to go a little bit slower now where we are, given that we still have a couple of years before our first Category 1 facility is up and operational, to try to be a little bit more conservative in our approach in spending, because we will probably identify a lot more needs as we get closer to the opening, and indeed, after their opening, we're expecting a lot of diverse needs that potentially we may need to mitigate.
Right.
Anyone else? I think you demonstrated where you tweaked a little bit from last year because you think it's a better practice. And I know that you'll be consistent with the same philosophy. I always think that's so important, too, when you have a similar application from the year before, let's say that the similar thought process goes into place. But excellent job. Thank you. Look forward to more information.
Thank you.
I do too, and actually, I did want to mention one other thing. On a couple of some of these requests, it might be the second year that we might be funding something related, or actually the same thing. I'd also be interested in data relative to the prior year, how that has gone, that either substantiates or makes us rethink, if anything, the second or the third year. So I look
That
forward
makes
to those discussions.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next on the agenda, we have the Investigations and Enforcement Division, Director Wells and her team.
Morning, Commissioner Cameron, members of the commission. So the
Morning.
first item on the agenda, under the purview of the Investigations and Enforcement Bureau, the table games rules and regulations. And I'm going to turn that over to Bruce Band, and I think Attorney Teresi as well. And we also have Burt Kane here from the property.
Sterl Carpenter,
Oh.
one of our.
Oh, pardon me, I didn't see him at the end.
Good morning, Commissioners.
Good morning.
Morning.
So I'm here again with Assistant Director Band and Senior Supervising Gaming Agent Kane to provide you with the draft table game rules of the game regulations, 205 CMR 147, as well as a set of 6 game rules, including craps and mini craps, blackjack, baccarat, midi baccarat, roulette and big six-wheel, and red dog. So the rules of the game regulations, as we've discussed, will govern the authorization process for table game rules, as well as certain standards that will apply to, excuse me, all table games. So I'm going to very briefly highlight a few sections of the regulations for you, and then Mr. Band and Mr. Kane will discuss the set of 6 game rules with you. So as we've discussed at the last several meetings, the regulations state that all authorized table game rules will be maintained on the Commission's website, as well as by the licensee in the casino's GameSense area. Section 147.02 of the regulations provides that only those games and their rules that have been authorized by the Commission and posted on the website may be offered for play, and that a new game or game variation may not be offered until it's gone through the approval process that's outlined in the regulations. Section 147.04 of the draft outlines the process for a petition for a new game or game variation. And this section includes all of the components that we've discussed previously, such as a requirement that a petition have a gaming licensee sponsor, that a detailed description of the game be submitted, including draft proposed rules, required equipment, and a report from a certified independent testing lab, and a requirement that a field trial be conducted. Thank you. The new game or game variation petition process also includes a public comment period, which will run for the duration of the field trial. Finally, the regulations note that a review of the proposed new game would be conducted by the Bureau, which would then make a recommendation to the Commission whether to approve or deny. The regulations also include sections related to notice requirements for changes by a licensee from one authorized game rule to another, or to permissible minimum and maximum wagers, sections related to gaming tournaments and the necessary notice to the IEB, prohibition of certain electronic devices at gaming tables, and provisions relating to minimum and maximum wagers. So in addition to the regulations in your packet, you have the first set of 6 game rules, as we discussed before, and Mr. Band and Mr. Kane are going to discuss those with you.
Today, we're kind of submitting craps, mini craps, blackjack, baccarat, and midi baccarat, roulette, and big six, as well as red dog. A couple notes on this. We had received some comments on additional wagers that the industry would like to see on that. We're working on that right now to add those to these sections, so you will get that at a later date that includes those. We're also looking at splitting roulette and big six, which is 5, and would make big six 5A, because they're really separate games. It would just make it simpler in the whole process. These are basic rules. They're there to review over the next few weeks. If you have any questions, we're open to them.
Questions?
I had a couple of quick questions. One is, it goes back to the actual rules of the game regs, and I think we talked about this, Carrie and Bruce and Burke. I'm just trying to get my arms around, how do we address the status of a petitioner for a new game? Do we view them as at what point do they need to be a vendor, vendor gaming primary? Trying to set out those expectations in advance for somebody that they're not forking over $15,000 or whatever the license application is before they start this process.
I began that conversation with Loretta Lewis, and we haven't come to a final answer, but we're looking to make sure if it's something like Caribbean Stud Poker you're bringing in, you're really renting the game from them, that we wouldn't charge a fee for that. But we need to get more details in that aspect of it to give you a good answer.
Again, I'm not necessarily convinced it needs to find its way here, but we're going to get the question posed to us by
Yes.
somebody who's exploring a game or by our licensees saying, how do we treat this individual?
Okay.
And my other question is just kind of a quick review I had of some of the rules. In roulette, when you call no spin, why is it important to try to stop the ball from landing in a spot after you've called no spin?
I'll let Sterl answer this because we brought him all the way up here.
Sure. Why you want to grab the ball is that you don't want the patron to see the outcome, because it's just pure, if you see the outcome and you are going to win, there's going to be a big problem, because you're going to feel like you've been slighted as the patron, even though the reg states, when you call no spin, it's no spin. Same thing will happen in all games, craps, all the outcomes. You want to try and stop and address the problem before the final outcome actually happens.
And you want to move on to the next play as quickly as
Exactly,
possible.
exactly.
Avoid complaints.
Yes.
Any other questions?
So remind us of the process. We are now going to be doing this on a rolling basis, like we discussed in a few meetings ago.
Yes.
And for these 5 or 6, we are seeing them for the first time in the regular promulgation, in the
So
formal
there's
promulgation
sort of
process?
two forms to the process on this because of the way we're doing it. This is the first time you're seeing the actual regulation, so what we would do next is put it out for informal comment and
Yep.
get any kind of industry comment or other public comment. We would then bring the reg itself back to you at the next meeting for a vote on the final promulgation to take it through the process. In terms of the rules, I think you have as much time as you need to review the rules and provide comments back to Bruce or Carrie or Karen or, whoever. And you'll get another set of rules, I think, at the next meeting, right, Bruce? Because
Yes.
we have a lot of games, so you probably have 2 or 3 more meetings worth of tranches of rules to look at. But we have a lot of time on the rules. We just want to get the overarching reg into the process. So right now, we'll do informal comment on the reg itself.
I also think it's important that the industry gets to see what games we're putting out there for they have an idea, even if we haven't approved them yet. At least it
Right.
gives them a good opportunity to review all of it.
Right.
So they have not looked at the industry has not looked at these rules as of yet?
No, they just kind of looked at the highlights, so we're presenting this the first time to everybody.
And just high level, 205-147 establishes the sort of framework,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah,
for-
that would be the
for access.
the
That-
regulation you have to follow, and the regulation that points you to our website, that you had to
Right.
follow the rules on there.
Where
I
they-
consider
yes.
it the enabling authority
Yes.
for us to then publish the rules.
Yes. But that's it in terms of framework that applies
Exactly.
to all the games.
Exactly.
Okay. That's good.
And there are slight differences, right, from jurisdiction to jurisdiction?
Yes.
But with your 72 years of experience, you feel like these are the
Actually,
ones
as a
we
group-
should adopt?
As a group, we're 234 years of
Oh.
experience, but, yeah, I think we did. We took them mostly from Maryland, Pennsylvania, and New Jersey. We did reach, I believe, into a few other jurisdictions for certain things, so it's a good cross-section.
Okay. Any other questions?
Well, I just have a general observation to make, and that is that it is really humbling to read these,
Yes.
read these rules, and it occurs to me that one almost would need to be an MIT engineer to be able to master these. I'm looking at the craps rules on a don't come bet shall win if on the roll immediately following placement of the bet, a total of 2 or 3 is thrown, or a total of 4, 5, 6, 8, 9, or 10 is thrown, and a 7 subsequently appears before that is tossed again.
We'll get you there.
You can actually. I've got a lot to learn.
Yeah.
They have a great cheat sheet.
Yeah, these games are very interesting, and I find this whole process fascinating. The shortcuts that are used in the industry so that you can get to all these rules are, I think, the basis for the training and the monitoring, which I think is really important.
Great.
So,
I heard some light reading for the next few days.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we are good. We will put this out for informal comments with our licensees, bring it back to you for formal promulgation, and then you'll just, again, get tranches of
The
rules
next
to
rules.
follow.
Yep. No votes necessary on this?
Not the informal process. In the formal process, there will be.
Great.
Great, thank you very much.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We have the next.
So the next item, the gaming equipment regulations, is the same. The next item on the agenda, the gaming equipment regulations, is our same group of professionals here.
Okay, and we're here today just really to answer the 4 questions that were brought up at the last meeting, to get some direction from the commission. The first question being, will the commission's design specifications be, what will they be for value chips? And we put a recommendation in there about the designs being approved by the IED, and with some specifics as to what that chip had to have on it.
All look fine.
All looks good?
Yeah, agreed.
Okay, then the second question was, how will the commission distinguish among value chips and various types of non-value chips, like poker tournament chips or the nature of that, which we have the suggestion in there again? Any questions or?
No. I think when you say you will review it with the licensee prior to use, probably before they have them made, correct?
Yes. You know, part of the process with doing that is you want to make sure that one licensee's chips aren't really close to like the other licensee's chips where they start to get commingled out in the casino, because the other property doesn't know what the anti-counterfeiting markings are in the chip and so on, so you wouldn't really want to encourage that.
So there's some overlap between the answer to question A and the answer to question B.
Yeah. Okay, will the commission regulate gaming plaques? And we recommend that, yes, we will. I'm sure both the Wynn and MGM properties will have play at that level.
We hope that.
We hope.
Yes. No questions about that? Do we?
No, sound
Okay.
recommendation.
Okay, will we have specific regulations for gaming instruments such as chips, cards, dice, tiles, and wheels, which we recommend we should have?
And some of these will probably mirror other states, much like we've done with other areas.
Really, with gaming equipment, most states are very similar to what they have. You have limited number of manufacturers out there for equipment. They don't want to be making things all different dimensions and sizes, so they're pretty standard.
Very good.
Great.
Pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
All right, so I think they can march forward with that consensus.
I do, thank you. Good recommendations.
I agree.
Thank you.
Okay, we're ready to move on to vendor license renewal forms. Do we need a break before we do that, or?
Yeah, what about?
Okay, why don't we take a 5-minute break?
Give a sip of water.
There you go.
Michael? All right, we're ready to resume our 210th meeting. We're in the middle of the report from the Investigations and Enforcement Bureau. And Director Wells, back to you.
Yes, so the next item on the agenda for the commission is the recommended approval of vendor license renewal forms. So that's on for a vote today. Mr. Connolly is unavailable. He's dealing with a family matter, so I'm going to handle that for the commission today. So in your packet, you will see there are 4 different forms that the IEB and licensing are recommending that the commission approve for us to use when we do renewals of gaming vendor primary and gaming vendor secondary licenses. As I expect you remember, by statute, that license term is 3 years. And initially, when we do the deep dive investigations, a very comprehensive investigation, you've seen the reports, you're familiar with the process. Now, given that it's only a 3-year license term and these investigations can take a year or more, and based on what other jurisdictions do, our proposal here for you, for the commission, is to sort of combine the renewal process with the reciprocal licensing process that's detailed in Section 31F of the gaming statute. So if an applicant is in good standing with us and other jurisdictions, they can enter into an agreement for an abbreviated licensing renewal process. And these forms allow for that abbreviated process, which I think is appropriate given that not only have we just done the deep dive investigation of these companies, but these companies are also under a continuing obligation to notify us of issues, and suitability is always ongoing with our licensees, even the vendor licensees. So you'll see there's 4 different forms. The gaming vendor license form, that is for the actual applicant entity that is applying for a license. Then we have, and that applies for both gaming vendor primary and secondary. Then we also have a gaming vendor qualifier form for entities. So if an applicant entity is applying for a license, but the parent company or some subsidiary or holding company is a qualifier, that's the form that the qualifier company would have to fill out. And then we have gaming vendor qualifier form for individuals. So an executive with a company like Konami or Sportech or one of these primary vendors would fill out that form instead of the extremely voluminous, multi-jurisdictional personal history disclosure form. So we're looking for some efficiencies here. And we also have sometimes we have trusts that are qualifiers for the applicant entities. And trusts, once we've done the analysis on the trust, a renewal is quite simple because it doesn't change much. We have in the form that there's request, if any changes for the terms of the trust, but those are relatively easier to handle from the investigative standpoint. I will note, for secondary vendors, the process we use now is the applicant for the application for the individual qualifiers, we use the GEL form. So the proposal is, because that's a much shorter and simpler form, we just use the same form for updates and for renewals because it's not very onerous. It's nothing at all like the multi-jurisdictional form. And that makes sense for us because those primary vendors are, those are the manufacturers, that's the key to the operations of the business, and those individuals are used to filling out those forms, they usually have them on file. Secondary vendors, they may never have had a gaming license, and that may be extremely burdensome for that company. So that made sense in the initial, our initial look at it, and that's been working well, so we'd recommend that you continue with that process. So that's sort of where we are right now.
I think it's a very appropriate, sort of efficient way to go about with this abridged form on the basis of the fact that we've licensed them already, and it's very appropriate to count these as the part of the, what's the word I'm looking for, relative to licensing in other jurisdictions.
Reciprocal license?
Reciprocity, yes. So I think it's great. I have a question relative to the following scenario. What if somebody has been licensed, they delivered a primary vendor, they delivered a lot of equipment, let's say, and come the expiration of that license, the casino does not anticipate immediate business with that vendor. What's the expectation from our standpoint?
So it's really, the ball is in the applicant's court. Their license could expire, and we've seen that in other jurisdictions when we've done jurisdiction checks on different companies. And it may be that they just allow their license to expire. There's no negative finding, there's no derogatory information for that reason. They may just let it expire for financial reasons or for business reasons. Sometimes companies merge or dissolve, so the license is expired for that reason. Generally, companies that are in active business like to keep up their licenses, so they would go ahead with going through with that. So it may be unusual as long as they're seeking to do business, even if they don't have a business relationship. It keeps them active in case one of our licensees for the casinos changes their mind and wants a product.
Right. But what if somebody's license expires for
Yep.
no other reason other
Right.
than, they just didn't seek a
Yep.
renewal? There's a period of time, and then there's an opportunity to do business again with the casino or with another casino in Massachusetts.
Okay,
Would
so-
we treat, hopefully, the renewal as, even though some time expired?
Oh.
Or do we need to
Do they need to start all over?
start
again?
all over?
Well, we
Hopefully-
haven't seen
hopefully
that. I
not.
mean, I think that it's almost like you'd be reapplying, we haven't seen that yet, so this is the first time I'm
Well,
thinking about it. I'm just thinking that,
conceptually.
it may depend on how much time has gone by. For example, if their license expires, it's expired for 3 months, and then they get business again, I think common sense dictates you just go through this process and allow them. I think we need, as a commission, to be flexible and be reasonable and take the situation, in hand. If a license has been expired for 7 years or 10 years, maybe we'd want to start all over again, particularly because if they haven't had that ongoing duty to update the commission and provide the commission for information on the company, then we, may look at it differently. So we'd have to see the time period of the expire, but I think that, given that if we've already done that deep dive of the company, you really get a good understanding of the company, especially if you have a very solid company. The ones we've seen have been very solid. Then there's much more of a comfort level that if they're in good standing in other locations, maybe you can enter into this reciprocal agreement and start you up again without too much of an onus on the company.
I'm just thinking of, a couple of things that from our process might incentivize companies to do one way or another, right? If it's low effort, to just renew.
Right.
And we're going to require them after some period of time, that may actually incentivize people to stay always current, regardless of the level of business.
And one other thing I wanted to just highlight for the commission to note in the form, the recommendation is that the renewal fee is the same as for the application fee. So that's $15,000 for the primary vendors and $5,000 for the secondary vendors. That's up to the commission, decision. Generally, we've seen in particular other jurisdictions, the deep dive investigation can take, can be $100,000 more. I've seen up to $200,000 on some of these vendors in other jurisdictions. So the license renewal fee itself is not a big chunk for these companies. They build it into their budget, they expect it. So I don't think they would expect it to be problematic, given that even if it's an abbreviated process for these, the ones that are the primary vendors, they're big companies. So you still have to have licensing, renew it, you still have to do the tabletop check. There's still some work to do, so it's a reasonable fee. But I just wanted to highlight that because I recognize that's the commission's call on the fee structure. And I don't think we've done any regulations on renewal fees, so I just wanted to alert the commission. If you want to change it, let us know, but my recommendation, at least for now, see how that goes. I can, if there's pushback, if there's concern, I can certainly bring it to the commission's attention.
Well, I thought there was an operating assumption that we'll put, or we are, setting our fees based on the level of effort that it actually takes. And we have to take averages because, we cannot have a very, very large, set of, somebody's going to take more than others, but you got to draw the line on averages and things like that. So maybe we'll continue to get intelligence as to what generally some of these investigations and renewals, now that we're going to make them,
Right.
take in terms of hours and
Yeah, and fiscal
average
tracks that.
costs.
We have a whole system for accounting for the costs, and that goes to fiscal for the billing. So we do the same thing, even
Yeah.
if we were close to that $15,000 mark.
Right, right. Well, another data point, I guess, or principle here that in my mind operates is just serves as a reminder, and we're just beginning, for one, I'm just beginning to understand the landscape of the industry, is that we might want to make sure that there's no barriers to new entrants, that by our process, we're not generating just a small group of vendors that do ongoing business with the casino. It's also in our interest, I would argue, that there's at least some attention paid to the potential of new companies that want to do business with the casino, even though we're talking specifically about gaming vendors primary, and that's a unique
Well, yeah, and it's
industry.
interesting because that ties in with what Assistant Director Band was saying about testing out new games or testing out new things. You could tie that in. There's some creative ways you could talk about, maybe a different kind of license for someone that has a new product. There may be opportunities for the Commission in Massachusetts to be a little progressive in that area, and I'd certainly be open to talking about that.
That'd be interesting.
Great.
Karen, I appreciate the time you and Paul spent kind of going through these applications the other day. I also had some concerns about the fee structure, but also understand that because so many of these folks are operating in different jurisdictions, they're used to it. I think we still, in comparison, have a lower fee structure than even some other jurisdictions have. I had one point which I shared with Paul yesterday on gaming vendor qualifier individual. I understand it's maybe at the last page, the tax information, check a number of years. Some of those would probably precede the licensing period from before. So I just highlight that in terms of, I know, and Paul answered, you said we'll be specific about what we're asking.
Correct. So we're not looking
individual.
to make it more onerous. In the scope of license, and this is a standard form, so we could, we can modify it per applicant, but that's why we put in the form, it'd be in the scope of licensing letters. So for example, if a company had given us, for their initial review, taxes from, say, 2011, 12, 13, and 14, we would start at 15. I don't need them to give me the taxes that we've already done. We're trying to be efficient, not just give me the last 5 years of taxes. Like, let's think it through, so we're not just doing it to do busy work.
How do we go about incentivizing folks that fall into these categories to kind of continue to provide you information? I mean, you're looking for a lot of things that happened between their point of licensure and their renewal date. How do we find a way to encourage them to give us that information?
As they
maybe
go,
it
so ongoing
speeds
suitability?
This renewal process even?
I mean, I think that it's much more ingrained in the culture for the primary vendors because they deal in the regulatory environment, the gaming regulatory environment. That's their bread and butter. That's how they make their money. That's their business. So they know, for example, if they have a violation or there's a significant lawsuit alleging some kind of misconduct, something like that. If they don't alert regulators and regulators have to find out and chase them down, that creates problems for them. So it's what we've learned in the industry, it's this culture of compliance and creating the culture of compliance that it's better for you to let me know than for me to have to chase you down. That's why the relationship between the regulator and the licensee is so important, and understanding the company and developing those connections with people that are executives in the company that are responsible for this. So the primary vendors, they're in that world, they understand that. A little more challenging for secondary vendors who may not have been licensed in a gaming jurisdiction before. So that's part of the investigatory process serves a dual purpose, because not only are you investigating the company, but you're also spending time and talking to executives, and they are understanding what this means and what are the potential consequences if something is found out and there's no self-disclosure, because there is a reliance on self-disclosure. So that's one of the benefits of doing that first investigation. That's when they learn about what it means to be a gaming licensee.
So you're educating as well as investigating?
Correct.
Yeah, so I think really what I get from this is that you are putting the onus on the licensee to be truthful, to update you, and it's really just what's changed in the last 3 years.
Correct.
Okay, very good. I agree with your thought process on this and the abbreviated forms. They look certainly appropriate, and you've mentioned this before, and as we've licensed some of these bigger companies, they've come in and talked to us about the professionalism of the investigations team and the relationship. So I certainly agree with you that having that initial relationship will make this process
Right.
much easier. So thank you for that and your team, and I think we need to vote on this, correct?
Madam,
Do we need a vote?
I believe we do.
Madam
So,
Chair.
we have a motion?
Yeah, I'd move that the commission approve the abbreviated renewal forms for gaming vendor license, gaming vendor qualifier entity, gaming vendor qualifier individual, and qualifier trust.
Second.
Further discussion?
Well, I would just note that, as you know, for the record, that I met with staff on these draft forms, and I expect that my fellow commissioners have as well, so that this vote, or my vote, today is not done just by having this presented to us today, and that provided an opportunity to review it, ask questions of the staff, have those questions answered, and I'm totally comfortable with these forms, and that's the basis of my seconding the motion.
Thank you. Any further discussion? All those in agreement, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Hearing none, the motion passes 4-0. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So the last item on the agenda for the Investigations and Enforcement Bureau, I have 3 individual casino qualifiers for your consideration on a vote regarding their suitability. One is from the MGM Resorts International, the other 2 are from Wynn Resorts International Limited. So I'll start with the MGM qualifier. It's Stephen Martino, who you may remember from our prior dealings with Maryland. He had been hired as the Senior Vice President and Chief Compliance Officer for MGM Resorts International in May of 2016. Based on his position, he was deemed to be a qualifier, and as a result, submitted all the required forms and supplemental documents requested by the licensing division and the IEB for the investigation, and the investigators conducted their rigorous background check, as I've stated before, including employment history, criminal record, education, looked at directorships and shareholder interests, civil litigation, bankruptcies, property ownership, political contributions, references, media coverage, and also did a financial responsibility evaluation. So all those areas were covered. There was no derogatory information found regarding Mr. Martino which would impact his suitability for licensure. So prior to being employed by MGM Resorts International, he was a partner at Duane Morris LLP. He is an attorney. He was also the director at the Maryland Lottery and Gaming Control Agency, and we had contact with him in that capacity. And prior to that position, he was the executive director of the Kansas Racing and Gaming Commission. He is a graduate of the University of Kansas with a BA in Political Science and a BA in Journalism, and also has a law degree from Washburn University School of Law. Prior to having this position at MGM, he had not obtained any gaming licenses. He had not worked in the gaming industry on the industry side. Currently, he is being investigated by New Jersey and Maryland, so those investigations are still pending in conjunction with his position at MGM right now. He does have in his background time period where he was Vice President membership and Executive Board member of the Baltimore Area Council Boy Scouts of America, and also Chief Counsel and Executive Board member of the Jayhawk Area Council Boy Scouts of America. Generally, his background was clean, and we have a recommendation of suitability for Mr. Martino.
Questions?
We-
Entertain a motion?
Madam Chair, I'd move that the commission approve the suitability determination for Stephen Martino, the Senior VP and Chief Compliance Officer for MGM Resorts.
Second.
Discussion? All those in agreement?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 4-0.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And yet, for the record, that investigation was conducted by Trooper John Morris for the State Police and by Colin Hennigan for the financial investigators.
Director, is this perhaps one of the first times that other jurisdictions are going to look at our determination of suitability?
I wasn't going to point out that, of the three, we were done first.
We were the
but-
first, right?
But they're also
We
busy
beat
jurisdictions.
Maryland.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And they must know him from before, so
Yes.
I think it makes it easier. So the other two qualifiers for your consideration this morning are from Wynn Resorts Limited. The first one, both are members of the Board of Directors. The first one is Elizabeth Patricia Mulroy. She is a qualifier by virtue of her position as an independent director for Wynn Resorts. She went through the same background investigation. I won't review again the individual criteria that we look at. She serves on the board's compensation, nominating, and corporate governance committees, and she also sits on the special committee to review allegations by a former director, Elaine Wynn. She is currently on that board. She also has a position as a senior fellow of climate adaptation and environmental policy at Brookings Institution at UNLV. She's a Mackey Distinguished Faculty Advisor for the Desert Research Institute in Las Vegas. She was a general manager and chief executive officer of Southern Nevada Water Authority and the general manager and chief executive officer of the Las Vegas Valley Water District. She had grown up partially in Germany, attending high school in Germany. She graduated from the University of Maryland Munich campus in Munich, Germany, and also has an undergraduate and a graduate degree from UNLV and had taken some postgraduate work at Stanford University. Although she was a member of the Nevada Gaming Commission from June of 14 to October of 2015, she's never applied for nor held a gaming license. In her current role as an independent director at Wynn Resorts, she's not required to file an application with the Nevada Gaming Control Board. She has a number of positions where she held directorships, and none of those positions raised any of the any concerns from members of the IEB for financial stability, and other background investigation materials came back clean, so the recommendation is for a finding of suitability for Ms. Mulroy.
Entertain a motion?
Madam Chair, I move that the commission approve the suitability of Elizabeth Mulroy, a member of the board, independent member of the Board of Directors of Wynn Resorts.
Second.
Discussion? All those in agreement signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes 4-0.
And that investigation was done by Lieutenant Kevin Condon and Ed Jay and Colin Hennigan from the Financial Investigations Unit. They also did the next individuals who's before the commission for a finding of suitability, Mr. Clark Thorpe Brandt Jr. of the Board of Directors. They conducted a suitability investigation on Ambassador Rant. He's also an independent director of Wynn Resorts. He currently holds one of 9 positions on Wynn Resorts Limited Board of Directors and has held that position since October 15th of 2015. And according to statements from the 8K from Wynn Resorts, from March 1st of 2015 to September 30th of 2015, Wynn Resorts Development was party to a consulting agreement with Rant and Company, a consulting firm of which Ambassador Rant was the president and sole owner, pursuant to which Ambassador Rant provided advice to Wynn Resorts Development. And the consulting contract was terminated in connection with his joining the company's board. Mr. Rant was nominated to ambassador to China by President George W. Bush. He was confirmed by the U.S. Senate and served as ambassador from 2001 to 2009. He is a recognized expert on Chinese law. In addition to being the ambassador to China, he's also been on the International Advisory Council for United Technologies and for the Cohen Group. He was also a partner in a law firm of Sherman and Sterling and headed a China practice from the Hong Kong office. He's a graduate of Yale University and the University of Michigan School of Law. And he also studied East Asian Studies at Harvard Law School. He is new to the gaming industry and has neither applied for nor held a gaming license in the past. Similar to Ms. Mulroy, in his current role as an independent director, is not required to submit to qualification from the Nevada Gaming Control Board. He holds a number of directorships and interests in other businesses were checked, and there is nothing of concern to the IEB. The record came back clean regarding his investigation, and the IEB is recommending that the commission find him suitable.
Questions? Do we have a motion?
Madam Chair, I move the commission approve the suitability report for Clark Rant, a member of the Board of Directors of Wynn Resorts.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in agreement signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion passes 4-0. Thank you very
Thank
much,
you.
Director.
Thank you, Director.
Okay, I have nothing further.
And thank you, Colin.
No
Okay,
sweater.
the next item on our agenda would be commissioner updates. Are there any updates for this meeting?
I have two quick updates going to our friends at Best Corps, who have training facilities to help people enter the any number of trades related to resorts and hospitality. Are having one of their graduations tomorrow. We also had a great AOC meeting earlier this week, and appreciate the participation of our two licensees as they go through the construction process. MGM was great about highlighting one of their WBEs, an all-women crew that does abatement, and the fact that they were so successful on the project that the company has gone out, has bought more equipment, is bringing on more employees. I mean, this is really, a microcosm example of what we've really hoped one impact of expanded gaming in Massachusetts would have. And related to our work on a Gaming Economic Development Fund recommendation report, we saw yesterday that the Senate has named their committee chairmanships, and Senator Lesser from the Springfield area is the new Economic Development Chairman. So Chairman Crosby and I will hopefully be going up to see him shortly.
Great. I had an opportunity to attend that meeting also, which I typically don't, and was also impressed with the level of commitment by the licensees as well as the community members. They really care about these issues and are, working toward best practices and sharing that information and having all of those goals met. So it was an impressive meeting.
I was thinking about the following when the team from Wynn was giving their report about the goals and how they're significantly exceeding a lot of them and meeting a couple of others. It was along what you mentioned, Commissioner, relative to in addition to goals being met, there's a capacity being built, and there's a business that now can do further business, has met a contract successfully, has probably grown, to some degree, is now able to do additional work, not just in the casino industry, but perhaps elsewhere. And what I was thinking, and I'm interested in, is perhaps our economic research team to incorporate and figure out what level of, in the research, what level of ripple effect, if you will, is happening as part of all these expenditures, rather than these anecdotes, which are very powerful, but in a systemic way, looking at that ripple effect. So it's something that I want us to continue thinking about and perhaps really quantify in some measurable way.
I think it's a great opportunity. We obviously have information on who all the subcontractors are, through our contractors or through the licensing process. And, especially for those small firms that, for example, are working on the wind project, we know of all the future developments that are already in the queue for the greater Boston area, but kind of keeping track and seeing what the opportunities are, as you pointed out, that they have to do additional business and kind of keep the ball rolling.
Yeah, what struck me while attending this meeting, which I hadn't thought of before, was the fact that, okay, the licensees are working hard to meet their goals, but they've gone a step further to actually start at the high school level to recruit, in particular, young women who have not thought of this particularly as a career choice. So while they're meeting goals, these folks will have skills that they can use for the rest of their lives.
Right.
So that was something that struck me as kind of another benefit to how hard everybody's working.
Well, our licensees are doing a great job. Their contractors are doing a great job. As you heard Commissioner the other day, the one-on-ones that they're having with subs who are not meeting their goals is almost an ongoing daily process about that reminder. But, getting young men and women to rethink what their careers might be and the opportunities in the construction field, as well as, again, a reminder on the operational jobs that it's never too early for people to start thinking about, even though we might be over a year and a half away from the opening of MGM and 2 years away from the opening of Wynn. It's not early enough for folks to think about what training can I do to put myself in a position for the jobs. Don't think last minute. You're going to be able to slide into a position as a cook if you've never taken a culinary class. So constant reminder we need to make.
Not to mention learning the rules of craps.
I turn to the expert right here.
Far from it.
Any further updates? Any business we hadn't anticipated?
Madam Chair, I apologize. One thing I forgot to mention in my administrative update was we don't forget the prospects of a tribal casino. And I think you all know this. Chairman Cromwell was reelected on Sunday as chair of the Mashpees. But obviously the status of the tribal casino right now is still uncertain. And as staff, we continue to monitor that.
Great. Thank you for that update. Any other business? Motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 We're adjourned. Thank you, everybody.